The PlayStation had 2 megabytes of RAM, no Z buffer, and a CPU that hated math. And yet, some developers managed to squeeze absolute miracles out of this thing. Today, we're looking at 15 JRPGs that pushed the PS1 to its breaking point, and most of you probably never played them. Let's go.
Okay, we're starting off dark here, and I mean really dark. So Koudelka is this weird hybrid thing. It's like someone took survival horror and a JRPG and just mashed them together. The whole game takes place in this haunted monastery in Wales in 1898. The vibe is just pure gothic nightmare fuel. You've got creaking floorboards, these grotesque monsters everywhere, and this oppressive atmosphere that honestly feels like if Silent Hill decided to make a turn-based RPG. Now here's where it gets interesting. The game used extensive motion capture for its cutscenes. In 1999, on the PS1. Let that sink in for a second. The director, Hiroki Kikuta, yeah, the guy who composed Secret of Mana, he actually flew actors out to Wales, captured all their performances, and then rendered these incredibly fluid, realistic animations. The characters move like actual people, not like those stiff polygon puppets you usually see in PS1 games. And get this, all the dialogue is fully voiced in English with professional actors. That was a massive flex for the time. The compression work they had to do to fit all that audio on the disc without it sounding like garbage? Honestly, pretty impressive. So why didn't anybody play it? Well, timing and marketing basically killed it. It came out in 1999, same year as Final Fantasy VIII and Chrono Cross. Square was just dominating every conversation about JRPGs, and this niche horror RPG from a smaller studio just got completely buried. Plus, the combat was grid-based and kinda slow, which was totally intentional for the horror vibe, but it turned off people who were expecting faster JRPG action. The game sold pretty poorly, but it laid the groundwork for the Shadow Hearts series, which has its own cult following now. Koudelka deserved way better.
Number 14, Parasite Eve II, 1999. From Welsh horror to biological horror, we're keeping things spooky here. Parasite Eve II is basically Squaresoft doing survival horror, and honestly, they nailed it. You play as Aya Brea, this NYPD detective dealing with mutated monsters that are spawned from mitochondria gone rogue. It's like Resident Evil meets Final Fantasy. You've got tank controls, limited ammo, dark hallways, but then you've also got RPG stats, magic spells, and you can customize your weapons. The technical flex here is the lighting. Most PS1 games with pre-rendered backgrounds really struggle to make the 3D character models feel like they actually exist in the scene, right? Parasite Eve II solved this by mapping light sources from the 2D backgrounds to the 3D engine. So when Aya walks through a hallway and passes under a light fixture in the pre-rendered image, her 3D model lights up correctly in real time. It's subtle, but it makes the whole game feel cohesive in a way most PS1 titles just don't. The fire effects, the pyrotechnic spells, they managed to get smooth transparency working when the PS1 absolutely hated alpha channels. It's genuinely impressive stuff. But here's the tragedy. It came out the same year as Resident Evil 3 and Silent Hill, and Square was known for turn-based combat and anime aesthetics, so people didn't trust them to do survival horror right. The marketing didn't help either. It was positioned as a sequel to the first Parasite Eve, which was more of a cinematic RPG than a horror game, so fans of the original felt kind of blindsided by the whole genre shift. It sold okay, but it never got the recognition it deserved as one of the best-looking, most technically competent games on the system. If you're into horror RPGs at all, this is required playing.
Okay, total tonal whiplash time. We're going from mutant nightmares to monster merging in a mystical forest. Yeah. Jade Cocoon is what happens when someone looks at Pokemon and goes, what if we made this weird and way more technically ambitious? You play as this young guy in a village that's surrounded by a cursed forest, and you capture these creatures called minions. So far, pretty Pokemon-ish, right? But here's where it gets wild. You can merge them, not just evolve them like in Pokemon, actually merge them. You take two monsters and fuse them into something completely new. And this isn't pre-programmed combinations. The PS1 is procedurally generating a brand new 3D model in real time based on the geometry and textures of the two parent creatures. For a console that struggled with basic texture mapping, this is borderline sorcery. The developer, Genki, wrote custom code to make the CPU modify 3D meshes on the fly, which is computationally expensive as hell. And somehow, it actually works. You can breed some absolutely cursed-looking abominations, or these elegant hybrids, depending on your luck and strategy. The pre-rendered backgrounds have this thick, alpha-blended mist layered everywhere that gives the forest this dreamlike but also kind of unsettling atmosphere. It's beautiful, but also creepy. So why is this a hidden gem? Marketing, again. It came out in 1998, right when Pokemon Mania was hitting the West hard, and Jade Cocoon just got dismissed as a Pokemon clone, despite being way more mechanically complex. It also had this slow, deliberate pacing that didn't really appeal to kids. The game's got a cult following now, but at the time, barely made a splash. Criminally underrated.
Let's talk about ambition. Like absurd, almost reckless ambition. Star Ocean II is a sci-fi JRPG where you travel between planets, recruit party members, make choices that affect the story. Standard stuff, right? Except this game has over 80 possible endings. 80! The whole game is built around this private action system where characters interact in towns when you're not around, and depending on who you talk to and what you say, their relationships shift. There's this invisible web of variables tracking affection points, friendship levels, rivalries. It's like the game is running a massive spreadsheet in the background while you're just trying to fight monsters. From a technical standpoint, managing all that data on the PS1's limited RAM while also running the main game is wild. The developers had to write incredibly efficient code to keep track of all those branching paths without the system just choking and dying. And on top of that, the game has extensive voice acting in battle. Characters call out attack names, react to each other, and the SPU dynamically prioritizes which voice clips to play based on what's happening. It's chaotic, and it somehow works. The real-time combat is fast, fun, and honestly, ahead of its time. It's not turn-based, it's an action RPG that rewards positioning and timing. But here's why it flew under the radar. It came out in 1998, same year as Xenogears and Final Fantasy VIII. Square was just eating everyone's lunch. Star Ocean II got decent reviews, but it didn't have the marketing budget or the brand recognition to compete. Plus, it's long, like 40 to 60 hours long. And with 80 endings, most people didn't even see half of what the game offered. It's a masterpiece of systems design that just got buried by the competition.
Number 11, The Legend of Dragoon, 1999. Sony really wanted their own Final Fantasy. Like, they really wanted it. The Legend of Dragoon was Sony Computer Entertainment's attempt to prove they could make a blockbuster JRPG without Square. And they went all in. $16 million budget, over 100 people on the team, 4 discs of content, extensive voice acting, FMV cutscenes everywhere. For context, that budget was absolutely massive in 1999. This was Sony swinging for the fences. The Dragoon transformation sequences, where characters turn into these armored dragon knights mid-battle, are technically demanding as hell. The engine has to swap character models in real time, load new animations, and trigger heavy particle effects for the special attacks without the frame rate just collapsing. And somehow they pulled it off. The pre-rendered backgrounds are gorgeous, the FMVs are high quality, and the sheer volume of content is staggering. The combat system is built around these additions, which are timed button presses. You see squares converging on screen, and you have to hit X at the exact right moment to chain attacks together. This required insanely low input latency. If there was even a frame of delay, the whole system would feel unresponsive.
The developers had to sync the visual cues perfectly with the PS1's refresh rate, which isn't easy on hardware that often had variable frame rates. So why isn't this a legendary classic? Two reasons. One, it sold well in North America, over 1 million copies, but it flopped in Japan. The high production costs meant it didn't recoup its budget the way Sony hoped. Two, it came out in the shadow of Final Fantasy VIII and IX. The combat system, while unique, was divisive. Some people loved the timing mechanic, others found it tedious. It's got a passionate fanbase, but it never became the Final Fantasy killer Sony wanted it to be. Still, as a technical showcase, it's incredible.
Scale. That's the whole story here. Suikoden II lets you recruit 108 characters, not party members, characters. You build an entire castle, manage an army, and participate in these massive battles where dozens of units are on screen at once. For a 2D sprite-based game on the PS1, this is a logistical nightmare. During the major battles, these big army versus army sequences, the screen is just packed with sprites. Now, the PS1 was optimized for 3D, not 2D, so Konami's engineers had to write custom drivers to maximize sprite drawing performance. They treated sprites as textured quads and leveraged the GTE's polygon pushing power to handle the density. It's a clever workaround, and it lets the game pull off these epic battle scenes without slowdown. The pixel art is beautiful. You've got detailed character portraits, expressive animations, and pre-rendered backgrounds that feel alive. And the story? Legitimately great. Political intrigue, betrayal, war, moral ambiguity. It's one of the best-written JRPGs of the era. But here's the tragedy. It had a tiny print run in North America and launched right alongside Final Fantasy VIII. Most people didn't even know it existed. The ones who did found it sold out or marked up to absurd prices. For years, Suikoden II was one of the most expensive PS1 games on the secondhand market. Complete copies were going for $200 plus at one point. It became this mythical lost classic that people talked about, but couldn't actually play unless they emulated or got really lucky. The recent HD remaster debuted strong in Japan, around 50,000 units in its first week across Switch and PS5, which shows there's still a ton of love for this game. But back in 1998, it got buried. If you've never played it, you need to fix that. It's a masterpiece.
Number 9. Breath of Fire 4, 2000. Capcom doesn't get enough credit for how gorgeous this game is. Breath of Fire 4 is a 2.5D JRPG, 2D sprites moving through fully 3D environments with a rotatable camera. That hybrid setup is really tricky to pull off because you need the sprites to feel grounded in the 3D space, and most games just don't. But Breath of Fire 4 absolutely nails it. The character sprites are insanely detailed. High frame counts for animations, you've got idle animations where characters stretch, adjust their gear, look around. It's the little things that make them feel alive. The protagonist, Ryu, has this constant sense of personality just from how he moves. Capcom allocated a ton of VRAM to sprite sheets to keep everything crisp, even when the 3D camera zooms in during combat. And then there's the music. Composed by Yoshino Aoki, it's this jazz fusion soundtrack that uses the PS1's sound processing unit to its absolute limit. The SPU has 24 channels for 80 CPM samples, and Breath of Fire 4 uses all those channels to create these layered, dense compositions that don't sound like the tinny MIDI garbage you hear with a lot of PS1 games. It's genuinely beautiful. The story's darker than you'd expect, too. Environmental collapse, genocide, moral ambiguity. It doesn't pull punches. So why is it overlooked? Timing. It came out in 2000, right as the PS2 was launching. By then, people were already moving on to the next generation. The Breath of Fire series also never had the name recognition of Final Fantasy or Dragon Quest, so it was always fighting an uphill battle for attention. It's a shame, because this is one of the best-looking 2D games on the system. If you like pixel art at all, this is required viewing.
Number 8. SaGa Frontier II, 1999. This game looks like a painting, like literally a painting. SaGa Frontier II used hand-painted watercolor backgrounds, actual paintings that were digitized and used as the game's environments. It's this soft, dreamlike aesthetic that looks completely unlike anything else on the PS1. The art style is just stunning. But here's the technical challenge. How do you integrate sharp 16-bit style sprites with soft, painterly backgrounds without it looking like a complete mess? The answer is dithering. The developers used specific dithering techniques to blend the pixel edges of the sprites with the watercolor backgrounds, creating this cohesive visual style that feels more like a moving illustration than a video game. It's brilliant. The game's structure is non-linear too. You follow multiple characters across different timelines, and the story weaves together in this way that's super confusing at first, but satisfying once it clicks. The duel system for learning new abilities is unique. You experiment in battle, and your characters spontaneously figure out new techniques. It's way more organic than the rigid skill trees you see in most JRPGs. But SaGa has always been niche. The series is beloved in Japan, but never quite caught on in the West. The non-linear structure and the lack of hand-holding turn people off. SaGa Frontier II sold over 675,000 copies in Japan, which is solid, but it barely made a dent in North America. If you're willing to meet it on its own terms, though, it's one of the most visually unique JRPGs ever made. Just don't expect it to play like Final Fantasy. If SaGa Frontier II looked like a painting, Legend of Mana looks like a straight-up storybook. The hand-drawn backgrounds in this game are absurdly detailed. Lush forests, bustling towns, surreal dreamscapes. It's all this vibrant, saturated pixel art that feels like flipping through an illustrated fairy tale. The sheer size and color depth of these backgrounds was actually a problem for the PS1's 2 megabytes of RAM. The solution? Aggressive asset streaming. The game loads background tiles and sprite data on the fly as you move, which allowed for these huge, non-repeating environments without all the tiling you'd see in 16-bit RPGs. The land make system is wild too. You collect artifacts and place them on the world map to create new locations. It's modular. The game has to be able to load any combination of areas in any order, which required a really robust file management system. It's technically impressive, even if the actual gameplay loop is kinda divisive. The combat is real-time and kinda chaotic. You can recruit NPCs and monsters to fight alongside you, and you craft weapons by tempering them with materials. It's got depth if you engage with it, but it's also easy to just button mash your way through. Here's the problem though. Legend of Mana is weird. The story is non-linear and fragmented. The tone shifts wildly from goofy to melancholy, and the game doesn't explain its systems well at all. It's the kind of game that asks you to invest time to really get it, and in 1999, most people just bounced off it. It sold okay in Japan, but was a niche release in the West. If you're into experimental, art-driven games, this is essential. If you want structure and clear objectives, you'll probably hate it.
Threads of Fate is a fully 3D action RPG with platforming, and it's way more ambitious than it has any right to be. You pick one of two protagonists, Rue, this quiet boy who can transform into monsters, or Mint, a bratty princess who uses magic, and each has a completely different campaign. Different mechanics, different story, different tone. Rue's campaign is serious and melancholic. Mint's is comedic and over the top. The engine had to handle two entirely separate sets of animations, combat logic, and UI elements within the same memory footprint. That's some efficient coding right there. The real flex though? Real-time, in-engine cutscenes. Most PS1 RPGs leaned on FMV because making low-poly models act and convey emotion is really hard. Threads of Fate said, nah, we'll do it anyway. The characters emote, gesture, and express themselves using just the in-game models. It's not always pretty, but it's technically impressive. The physics engine for platforming is pretty robust too. Jumping, collision detection, environmental puzzles, it all works. Rue's monster transformation mechanic is especially cool because each monster has different physical properties and hitboxes, so the CPU has to recalculate everything mid-combat when you shift forms.
So why didn't this blow up? Marketing and timing as usual. It came out in 1999, the same year as like a dozen massive JRPGs, and Squaresoft didn't push it hard. It also got dismissed as a kid's game because of the cartoony art style, even though the mechanics are solid and Rue's story is genuinely touching. It's a cult classic now, but at the time, totally overlooked. Shame, because it's a really creative game that tried something different.
Number 5. Xenogears, 1998. Ambition. Infinite, reckless, beautiful ambition. Xenogears is a game that tried to do everything. It's got a fully 3D overworld with 2D sprite characters, a 360-degree rotatable camera, which was pretty rare for Square RPGs, on-foot combat, mecha combat, this convoluted narrative about religion and existentialism, and a scope so massive the developers literally couldn't finish it. The gear combat is technically impressive. These are giant mechs, and the game dynamically scales the environment to make them feel huge. The engine handles collision detection, camera angles, and combat for 50-foot robots using the same systems built for human-sized characters. That's not easy. The seamless transition between human and mech combat without load screens? Really slick. And then there's Disc 2, the infamous, divisive, heartbreaking Disc 2. Halfway through the game, it shifts from exploration and dungeons to a visual novel. You literally just sit in a chair while a character narrates what's happening, with static images and voice acting filling in the gaps. Why? Because they ran out of time and budget. Square was crunching hard on Final Fantasy VIII, and Xenogears got deprioritized. The developers had to finish the story somehow, so they pivoted to this multimedia storytelling format. High-quality narration and 2D art to convey the plot without having to build more 3D environments. It's heartbreaking because you can just feel how much more the game wanted to be. But even in its compromised state, Xenogears sold over 1.1 million copies worldwide. The story, despite being incomplete, really resonated with people. It's this sprawling, philosophical epic about identity, religion, and trauma, and the fanbase is super passionate. The game's legacy is complicated, but there's no denying it pushed the PS1 in ways most developers wouldn't dare. It's a beautiful disaster.
Let's talk about the most technically ambitious and divisive JRPG on the PS1. Chrono Cross prioritized fidelity over performance. The character models in battle are insanely detailed for the system. Distinct fingers, complex facial geometry, intricate outfits. They avoided that blocky, chunky look that defines most PS1 characters. The developers used a dynamic level of detail system, swapping in ultra-high poly models for close-ups and lower poly versions for wide shots. Smart move, but it came at a cost: frame rate. During heavy element attacks, that's the game's magic system, the frame rate drops hard. We're talking sub 15 FPS in some battles, because the CPU is just choking on the lighting, transparency effects, and geometry all at once. But man, those pre-rendered backgrounds though, they're some of the best on the system. Vibrant, tropical, full of color and depth. The game uses a lot of VRAM for color lookup tables to achieve that richness, and the lighting matching between the 3D models and 2D backgrounds is exceptional. It feels cohesive in a way most hybrid games just don't. The story and structure are polarizing. You've got 45 recruitable characters, parallel dimensions, this convoluted plot about timelines and fate. Some people love it. Some people hate it because it's not Chrono Trigger. The combat system is unique. No MP, no random encounters, just this element grid system that rewards experimentation. Sales-wise, it did okay. 1.5 million copies worldwide by 2003. But it was always in the shadow of its predecessor. The recent Radical Dreamers Edition remaster brought it back into the conversation, and modern analysis revealed just how tied the original performance was to the PS1's specific timing quirks. It's a game that pushed the hardware to the breaking point, for better and worse. If you can handle the frame drops and the divisive story, it's worth experiencing.
Just don't expect Chrono Trigger 2.
Number 3. Valkyrie Profile, 1999. This is the pinnacle of sprite-based graphics on the PS1. Full stop. Developed by Tri-Ace, Valkyrie Profile is a 2D game that uses the PS1's 3D hardware to do things sprites normally can't do. The lighting engine is the star of the show here. When the protagonist, Lenneth, casts a spell or wields a glowing weapon, the light actually reflects off the environment and the sprites themselves. The developers treated the sprites as flat polygons within the GTE, which let the lighting engine calculate shading and color tinting in real time. This gave 2D assets this volume and presence that felt almost 3D. The particle effects are unreal. The Nibelung Velesti finishing move is this cascade of light, energy, and screen shake, and the PS1 handles it without slowdown. The GTE is managing hundreds of particle sprites simultaneously, and it just works. The combat system is unique too. Side-scrolling battles where you control up to 4 characters at once, chaining their attacks for combos. It's fast, satisfying, and demands precision. But here's the tragedy. Valkyrie Profile was a niche release. It sold around 709,000 copies worldwide, with about 636,000 of those in Japan and the rest in North America. The game launched late in the PS1's life cycle. It had limited marketing, and the Norse mythology setting didn't have the mass appeal of medieval fantasy or sci-fi. For years, it was this cult classic that people talked about in hushed tones. The PSP remaster helped, and the recent Elysium remaster brought it to modern platforms. But in 1999, most people just missed it. If you care about what the PS1 could do with 2D art, this is required playing. It's a technical and artistic masterpiece that deserves way more recognition.
Number 2. Vagrant Story. This is the most technically impressive game on the PS1. That's not hyperbole, that's literally the consensus among technical historians. It's a fully 3D game with a rotatable camera, real-time lighting, and visual fidelity that rivals pre-rendered titles. And it does all of this on hardware that wasn't even designed for it. The character models are legendary, expressive faces with moving eyes and mouths, achieved by swapping texture maps on the face mesh in real time. The textures look detailed, not despite the PS1's limitations, but because the art style embraced the pixelation as this gritty aesthetic choice. Everything looks weathered, lived in, industrial. It's brilliant. The lighting is dynamic. Rim lighting separates characters from backgrounds. Torches cast flickering shadows. The developers implemented custom sorting algorithms to work around the PS1's lack of a Z buffer, which eliminated most of the texture warping and polygon popping you see in other 3D games. And the load times? Almost non-existent. The game streams data between rooms to create this seamless dungeon crawling experience. That's hard to pull off on a CD-ROM-based system. The combat is methodical. Think Dark Souls before Dark Souls existed. You target body parts, chain attacks, manage weapon durability. It's dense, and it doesn't hold your hand at all. So why isn't this the most famous PS1 game ever made? Because it's hard, not just mechanically, but conceptually. The story is told through cryptic dialogue and environmental storytelling. The systems are complex and poorly explained. It launched in 2000, right as the PS2 was hitting, so it got completely overshadowed. It sold okay, but it never became a mainstream hit. But ask anyone who really knows PS1 hardware, and they'll tell you, Vagrant Story is the peak. It's what happens when a talented team led by Yasumi Matsuno completely masters the platform. It's a technical miracle.
Number 1. Final Fantasy IX 2000. We're ending with the crown jewel, the victory lap, the culmination of everything Square learned across the entire PS1 generation. Final Fantasy IX came out in 2000, the final year the PS1 was actually relevant, and it's the best-looking game on the system.
The return to a stylized, super deformed aesthetic wasn't just nostalgia, it was a smart technical decision. Smaller, chibi-style characters meant higher polygon counts and more expressive animations. The facial expressions, the idle animations, the way characters move, it's all a massive step up from 7 and 8. The texture mapping is phenomenal. The PS1's limited texture cache usually resulted in muddy, pixelated surfaces, but FF9 used high-contrast texturing and varying levels of detail to give clothing and armor actual depth. The Mist particle engine, this fog system that's integral to the plot, required serious GTE horsepower. You've got semi-transparent layers of mist permeating the screen without tanking the frame rate. That's some serious optimization. The FMV integration is seamless. By 2000, Square had refined their video compression codecs to the point where cutscenes blended almost imperceptibly with pre-rendered backgrounds. Those macro-blocking artifacts from FF7? Gone. Spanning 4 discs, the game is just stuffed with content. Long, clean FMVs, detailed environments, a sweeping story. And it's sold. 8.9 million units worldwide as of 2025, physical and digital combined. That's massive. It validated the high-budget cinematic approach even as the PS2 was launching. FF9 is proof that technical mastery isn't just about raw power. It's about knowing your hardware inside and out and making smart artistic choices. The pre-rendered backgrounds are locked to 320 by 240. The 3D models are low poly by modern standards, but the art direction makes it timeless. It's the perfect send-off for the PS1 era.
So there you go. 15 JRPGs that pushed the PS1 to places it had absolutely no business going. Some of them sold millions, some of them barely sold at all. But every single one represents developers squeezing every ounce of performance out of 2 megabytes of RAM and a CPU that was already outdated by the time these games shipped. If you've played all 15 of these, congratulations, you're a true PS1 JRPG scholar. If you haven't, well, you've got some catching up to do. Which one should I cover in depth next? Let me know in the comments. And if you made it this far, seriously, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.